Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's 1 o'clock. We're the Flagler County Board of County Commissioners Workshop. This is a budget workshop. If you'd all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And as we always do, I'm going to ask you to join me in a moment of silence where we think about the great work that our first responders do and our men and women in the armed forces that are on watch throughout the world. And once again, to be thankful for living in the free state of Florida and this great county of Flagler. Thank you. Please join me. Thank you. Well, welcome, everybody. This is a budget discussion that will be followed by a special session of the commission. Ms. Petito, are you going to lead this off?
I will certainly start, and then at some point we'll be joined by the folks in financial services. So good afternoon, and thank you all for being here as we talk about the tentative budget for fiscal year 24. Based on the guidance and feedback from the board and to provide opportunities for more public input, we've held more budget workshops than in probably some of the more recent previous years. From the time the early budget discussion started back in December of 2022 through the final adoption, which will take place in September of 2023, there's a total of 10 meetings that we've conducted and held to be able to provide opportunities for the public to provide input. Here's a look at those that we've already completed, and I'll walk you through the ones that we have remaining. So here's a look at the important meeting dates that we've got coming up, starting with today, which is July 10th. I'm going to present you with the tentative budget for next year, and then a little bit later, the board will convene a special session for them to take action where you'll actually set the millage rates for 24. And again, the setting of the millage rate is not a definitive action. It's a rate that you're going to establish that is the highest level. In other words, you can't increase it, you can always decrease it. So I just wanted to let the public know that as well. But that will be happening a little bit later today. And then coming up, we have another workshop where we're going to talk about capital improvement, what that plan's going to look like, the final plan for next year, even though it's going to be incorporated in today's conversation at the tentative level. And then you'll have the your final proposed budget adoption, which will be today's, I probably should have started with this one, but today's meeting as the tentative budget, it's my budget to you on the best way that I could budget and come in with a balanced budget, which is a requirement of statute. If there's any changes to be made to what I've presented today, this will give us an opportunity to discuss those changes and then come back to you so that in August 7th, when we bring that budget forward for kind of more of your final adoption, that would then be the budget that we carry forward to that first public hearing and second public hearing. So today, as I said, the tentative budget is my budget. I'm handing it over to you. So any changes that are made from today moving forward will have to be done in the public. So those are the dates that we've got coming up. So back in December, when we met and we talked about, having a focus on looking at our strategic plan and making sure that our funding, as we move forward, is aligned to and committed to fulfilling that strategic plan. These are the 4 pillars of that strategic plan for Flagler County, starting with effective government, economic vitality, growth and infrastructure, and then your public health and safety. So with that in mind, I thought it would be helpful to show you, based on next year's budget, what you're funding by strategic priority. So beneath each one of these pillars, you've got the amount of money that's allocated out of next year's budget to support your strategic plan. So when you're looking at your effective government, we talk about financial stability, we talk about those operating reserves. Throughout the year, we do tap into that contingency reserve. That's what it's there for. And then we do fill it. That's the first thing we do, is we take a look at your operating reserves, and that's the first thing that we go back and we fill up. Your financial stability, that's what we refer to as 2/12, which is 2 months of operating. As a coastal community, we really would like to get to 3/12 or 3 months of operating. And then, you know, when you talk about effective government and the things that are identified in our strategic plan, it talks about communication and improved transparency. It talks about innovation, engagement, and staff development. So those are some of those costs. When you look at economic vitality.
Just before you,
Sure, go ahead.
on effective government operating reserves, 5,876,000. That was what I was getting at this morning. Is that just from the new money coming in this year, or does that include any reserves that we would carry over from the previous year?
You'll see as we go through the presentation, there's a slide where we're going to talk about reserves. So naturally, we budget for all of the reserves. We don't intend on spending all of them. So out of the reserves that you currently have, you've got about 20 million that'll probably carry forward. I'm thinking off the top of my head, but somewhere around 20 million that'll carry forward. So we're filling the
That's operating
gap.
reserves and other reserves.
And others, yeah. So when you look at the total, and like I said, it's coming up in the presentation, but this is the new number that you're going to have starting October 1st of '23. When you go to start our budget October 1st, your operating reserves are going to be restored back to the 5.8. That's 5%.
Some of that could be left over from last year?
Correct. It's part of the carry forward process. So when I said there's 20 million that we're going to carry forward, that 20 million is a makeup of whatever is going to be remaining in your operating reserves, whatever you've got left in your financial stability or your 2/12, and whatever you've got remaining in your restricted reserves.
Okay, and you're going to, at some point, I'd like to see what
It's
that
coming
number
up.
is
Yep, it's coming up.
today. Yeah, okay.
Sure. Economic vitality, these are the functions that fall within economic vitality. And then you look at your growth and infrastructure.
Heidi, on the economic vitality, the tourism development, housing assistance program, and Flagler Executive Airport, those are all not ad valorem monies, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. The only portion of that that is general fund dollars is the top one, the 343. The other ones, but again, this is all funding. It's not just looking at your general fund. This is all funding. When you look at growth and infrastructure and you look at the capital projects that we have, we've got a lot of legislative money coming in this year. So that accounts for a large portion of your capital projects. But you also have some other things that go into those. So you've got, you know, capital equipment, you've got innovation technology. One of the things that it did call out was cybersecurity, you know, and again, the environmentally sensitive land program, that's something that our community is very mindful of, maintaining, you know, quality of life. And then when you look at public health and safety, that's just a breakdown. When you look at law enforcement, fire rescue, fire flight, EMS, when you're looking at emergency management, one of the items that will be crossing over between 2 fiscal years is the fire flight replacement. So that will start this fiscal year, and then a portion of it will be covered in fiscal year '24. That number, that 5.3, is the total replacement cost, approximately, of what that is going to look like. But because it does go over the 2 fiscal years and it's a more recent thing, I chose to show it there under public health and safety.
We've executed that, correct?
I have an update in the presentation today. There is board action that will be required at the special meeting, but we'll talk about it towards the end of the presentation. The expansion of behavioral health, that's one of the legislative appropriations we got, and then your health and human services as part of that public health and safety. So here's some of the tentative budget highlights. for next year. We do have a balanced budget at a current rate of 8.3343 mils, which does represent a decrease over last year's millage rate. It is a slight decrease, but this proposed rate will generate roughly about $114.5 million, which is a 14% increase over last year. A breakdown of some of the BOCC, Board of County Commission, increases. We did have the 5.3% COLA increase, which was about $930,000. You've got the required FRS retirement rate increase of $725, the increases to the employee health insurance program. So that's the three major ones that are accounted for on the board side. So when you're looking at the highlights, the board's total expense budget is $278 million. That's all funds, but it does include the addition of 4 general fund funded positions for next year, adding those. So we've got 2 in fire rescue, we've got 1 in information technology, and then it's considered an add, but it's a percentage of salary, but we have 1 in the ag or IFAS extension office. And then we've got 2 that are non-funded, non-general fund funded positions, and those are in your building department. And again, they're enterprise funds, so they cover the cost of those. Then taking a look at the sheriff's budget for next year, we've been able to fulfill his need and ask of the $41.9 million, which is an increase over the previous year. But again, he's got a lot of the same COLA increases, FRS rates, fuel, things like that, but we were able to fund the 5 new deputies. And then just looking at the other constitutional officers, we were able to fulfill their needs as well, including the 3 newly funded positions. We had the 1 ask from the supervisor of elections, and then we had the request for 2 from the clerk of court. And then again, just looking at the capital project funding, for next year, it's $38.2 million, which is an increase of about $34.5 million over the present year. We also have $3.1 million for capital equipment replacement, and you've got a lot of other projects that are funded through non-ad valorem or legislative appropriations. I mentioned the $10 million for the mental health. We also received $10 million for replacement of a fire station, as well as $4.6 million in wildlife conservation properties. So here's a look at the property valuation growth, and this is based on the numbers provided to us from the property appraiser's office. On July 1st, I think it was actually the day before, they provided this information to us. So you can see that the new construction cost has gone up from last year to this year. It went up about 53%, and then the existing property values also went up about 12.6%. Part of that is commercial properties, which aren't held to that same homestead exemption, and then some of this larger difference is the properties that are non-homesteaded. But in total, if you look at the total valuation, it did go up the 14.12%.
I just, for our chairman, in the Value Adjustment Board that we've been on, we always have to approve that lower number there, total valuation. I'm just wondering, for historical purposes, is that now the largest it's ever been in the history of the county? I don't think it is, but I think it's close.
I don't know. I'd have to rely on our finance folks.
Well, if
or
our
Jay.
property appraiser was here, he could
Yeah.
tell us. But
He would know, but we can find
it's
out.
just a small point, historical point. Have we gotten back to the point we were at the peak there before the recession?
I thought we had, but I'd have to clarify that with
I
the
remember
property
something in the
appraiser.
20s. No big deal, just a question.
So we talked a little bit earlier about the general fund reserves, so this was that number that you were referring to. Looking at the current reserves, where they're at, as I mentioned, we have been taking money out of the contingency or the operating reserves. So we did have to increase that back by the 3 million that we've taken out over the last year. That was one of the first things that we needed to do. On the financial stability.
So that 2,910,000 is the current reserves? Or is that what we're
No,
adding?
when you're looking at that change, it's actually a decrease from the previous year. So your contingency reserve is going up. That's your operating reserve. And that's going up because that 5% has increased.
Yep.
So whatever the budget went
Right,
up, it's
right.
the 5%. So that's what that increase is. The financial stability, which is your 212s, or the money that we typically would grow to be the 212s, that is actually going down. The deficit was a lot larger. So instead of it being 212s, what this correlates to is about 1.66. So it's a little over 1.5 months of operating that we hold in there. We were able to add about 428,000 to that. It was a much larger deficit than the 1.7 million that's shown there. So column to the left is what you started the year with in '23. In '24, you will be having a little bit less. Now, part of that is that the restricted is your helicopter. So we're pulling the money out to purchase the helicopter, so you would expect that one to go down. The financial stability is the one where we've got a lot of money on the street right now with your beach renourishment, seeking to get some of that funding back from the federal government. We did have some expenses that came out of there that we were not able to plug the hole on. And then naturally, because your budget increases, your 2/12 becomes larger. So we weren't able to fill the gap on some of those. So that's why you're seeing a little bit of a deficit there.
So the money that we expect to get back from FEMA, for instance, is that reflected here?
Yes.
That we expect to get it back?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah. That makes up the 16 million. Yeah.
got it. Thanks.
Right. Oh, okay, so this is the budget for next year. This is what we,
You would
the
essentially,
23, 24, that's what we're going to have to put in reserves.
that's what your reserve will start with on October 1st. You'll have $23.6 million in reserves.
And for today, what would that number be?
I'm not sure if I understand. We started the budget in '23 with 26.5. Today, we don't have 26.5. I know we've tapped into the contingency.
I'm just wondering how much kind of just moves forward almost.
Oh, of that, the carry forward is about 20 million. So when you're looking at that 23.6 that we're going to start fiscal year '24 with, 20 million carries forward from '23 into that. So we're making up the deficit between the 20 million and that 23.6 million.
And each one of those numbers, the second column over, contingency, 5609,769 is what we started with last year, or this current year.
Correct.
So if I want to know how much that was today, what would that number be? Just for
What
contingency?
she just said.
It's 2.79 million in that account right now.
Okay.
So we've had to fill that gap. That's the,
That's, I'm just trying to get a feeling for that. Now, do we think we'll hold that at 2.7 till the end of the current fiscal year?
we don't anticipate anything coming forward.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know of anything coming forward, so.
That was my question, because in the past, we've had between the fire truck or the helicopter, we've had, or the jail security items that came out of reserves that maybe should have been budgeted. But, so we're starting off this 23-24 budget without any of those types of items that you know of.
Correct. I mean, we always try to avoid those, and that's why we're updating all of our capital plans. I think what we had we kind of got caught up on, like, for instance, with the cameras, was that was a project that had been deferred many years, and so now it's the impact of what that project was originally and what the cost came in at in today's dollars. So what we're doing is trying to shore up those gaps, making sure that we have the latest numbers. Again, it's only as good as today, the day that you're getting them. Typically, you don't know those numbers definitively until you put it out for a bid. We do have, and we do recognize that we have some challenges moving forward when it comes to our roads, whether it be engineering projects or even your public works maintenance projects, where gas tax isn't keeping up. We do get money from FDOT for some of those projects, but there is no pot of money that sits in our budget that can be used as those matches. So we do have an upcoming workshop. That's the workshop we're having next Monday. It doesn't directly affect today's presentation so much, but it is an opportunity for us to look at alternative revenue streams and whether or not the board would like to pursue those and what does that look like. So when we met in October, or I'm sorry, not October, it was December and then again in January, we kind of talked about how do we diversify our revenue stream and not rely so heavily on the general fund? So what are those things that we can do? And we talked about some of the legacy expenditures and things that are tied to statute that maybe we're not required to do. And we've worked through one of the issues this year, but we've got a list of others. So there's things like that we could do, but it's going to take time to phase in those approaches. But then there's other revenues like, I'm not a huge fan of gas tax, but that was one of the options that the county could do. Another one is half-cent sales tax. There's MSTUs, MSBUs, which would allow you to decrease your millage rate and then just it's a different taxing unit, but it's based on the recipient of the benefit. So maybe it's a more fair way of doing it. But anyways, not to get sidetracked with that, but we typically try to anticipate whatever those costs are coming up so that we don't have to tap into our contingency reserve, especially the first month of our new budget or anytime throughout the budget. But there are unforeseen things that happen. We anticipate the roads being one, and that's why we're going to have a workshop discussion next Monday to talk about that. So,
Is there any progress on whoever we hired to do the, look into the beach funding, establishing an MSBU or something for the beach?
we have a workshop for the beach. It's actually, I believe, hold on. I think it's in August, yeah.
Okay.
It might be, I think I have it on my calendar, but it should be a workshop. We have a tentative workshop on August 7th.
Okay.
Where we're going to talk about some of the items. I think it was, I'm not sure if it's that particular one, but I know we still have to come back to you with the stormwater being an issue, and there's going to have to be some way of funding mechanism for that. The other one is the beach management plan. That's another one. And then the roads, which is the one that we're going to talk about on Monday, next Monday.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yep. So here's just another look at the general fund reserves in a pie chart where you can see naturally the financial stability or our 212s, what we hope to get to be 212s or 312s, showing the largest portion. The green is your contingency, and then your restricted. Your restricted is things that are tied to like DRIs, where we had developers that had requirements to provide funding to the county, whether it's money for an ambulance or a fire truck, things like that. There was a donation intended for the library, that's in there. There's also some restricted reserves for like your personnel costs, things like that. So that's what makes up the restricted.
Is that where our CRA funding, where we have to pay marine land, for instance? Is that
No,
where that comes out
That
of?
comes off the top the minute we get our funding allocation. That's the.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah, we'll go over that because I actually have
All
a
right.
slide for that one too. But here's a look at Flagler County's bonded debt ratings. We're in a good position. Our bond rating is an AA or an AA2. This is considered a high-grade credit worthiness based on our financial strength, cash flows, our debt repayment ratios, and some other financial ratios that they look at. We continue to maintain or improve our municipal bond rating by adhering to our financial and reserve policies. This is something that's also tied to our strategic plan. When you talk about effective government, it is maintaining that bond rating or improving it. So that is something that we look at on a regular basis, and we incorporate long-term financial planning in all of our policy decisions and the decisions that you make as a board. So I just wanted to share that with you. And then here's a look at all of our debt service that's scheduled for next year. And these are not all general fund debts, but this is a combination of all of our debt service payments that we pay out. So we pay out a little over 10 million, about 10.6 million in debt. And there's a whole debt schedule that's part of the budget book that we put together every year. I don't know if anybody's got questions on these, but we did add to the general fund debt service the anticipated amount for the helicopter. It's really just moving it from an operating to a debt service. We typically set aside $250,000 a year for the helicopter replacement fund that was sitting in your restricted reserves. This is just now moving that same allocation to be able to cover the debt service payment. So it just moves from one account to the other, but that's what that increase is there for that general fund. And this is a look at, another look at the 4 items that are general fund supported debt. So you've got your communications network for public safety, that's the equipment and the infrastructure. Part of those are funded through us, through our general fund departments, and some of those get funded through the cities and the partners that we have that are on those systems. And then you've got your capital improvement note on the Sheriff's New Operations Center. And then you've got the revenue bonds that were created for this complex. So you've got the one coming off in 2030, the other 3 maturities in 2036. But again, those were on the previous slide. This is just calling out those that are supported through your general fund dollars. So this is a look at your total revenue sources by category. This is a total of all the funds shown for that tentative budget of $278 million.
You know, what always troubles me on this is that we get a lot of extra money that comes in, past ad valorem and anything. Do we take a swag at that, what we think we're going to get in the various grants and things like that that come in? Because we always have these, you know, unexpected influx of cash, you know, from one organization or another. Do we show that anywhere in here, what we think it's going to be? Or is that just
We try
nice
to,
when we get them?
no, we try to anticipate if we know that we're going to have revenue, and throughout the budget year, I mean, we don't just do the budget once a year. So even, you know, throughout the year, we're looking at, you know, whatever our revenue projections were, or we believe them to be. So we're looking at it throughout the year, not just at budget time, but looking to see, are we trending where we thought we were going to be? Are we actually taking in more? Are we taking in less? What does that look like? And then we try to forecast, in addition to not just the revenues, but our expenditures. What do we think we're going to spend through year end? And then we try to roll up whatever we're not going to spend as part of that cash carry forward, in addition to looking at those revenues. And if we have any that are considered, like sometimes you'll see an agenda item where it'll come in front of you and it'll say unrealized revenue. That's
Right.
money we didn't anticipate.
Right.
But we try to capture everything that we know today. But again, it's a picture in time. So, you know, we try to do our best to capture what that is and anticipate what we think it's going to be for next year. But as with anything, things pop up and we just have to adjust for them.
Right. Thank you.
Yep. So again, the other one was your revenues. This is a look at your total expense by activity. And this is, again, all funds. So when you're looking at public safety, what you would believe public safety to be, that's not necessarily all-inclusive of the money that you spend on public safety. This breakdown is based on the direction that we're given by the state and how the state's budgets are set up and accounted for. But for instance, when you're looking at public safety and you're looking at the 43 million shown, that represents fire, EMS, Fireflight, your emergency management. They actually consider the building department to be part of public safety. When you look at like the approval of life safety code and construction and things like that, that's actually rolled up into public safety. It's your CAD, it's your E911. There's internal sheriff expense that we run through, like for his insurance and some of his fleet stuff, or radios. The 800 megahertz radio system, that's what's in public safety. But you notice I didn't say the sheriff because the sheriff's not part of that number. His portion is in the transfer to constitutional. So when you see that 50 million, he's 41 million of that. And so if you really added that, into public safety, that would probably be the closer number that you have going into public safety. And then when you look at the constitutional, the only constitutional that's not included in there is the tax collector, because she's a fee officer. So she's actually part of our general government budget. So when you look at general government at 28 million, it includes the tax collector. So when you're looking at this, it's not as easy to just say, oh, well, that's us and this is the constitutionals, because there's a lot of. And again, this goes back to the reporting at the state level. This is how the state breaks it down, and therefore that's the way we report it. I don't know if there's questions. I don't know if it's ever been explained, but a little wonky. But this is probably a little bit easier way to look at the countywide budget broken down. Again, we only budget at 95% of the tax value because we don't anticipate always getting 100%. So it's kind of like a bonus when we collect more than 95, and that's one of the things when you talk about the revenue. Like we're trending at 96% instead of the 95. So that little 1% is typically the money that helps offset the impact of next year's budget. So when we go to prepare the budget, we're not just looking at, I don't want to call it new money, but property valuation increases, but we're looking at any existing revenue that we thought, where are we at with it? Are we actually collecting more? Are we collecting less? We actually are trending a little bit higher than the 95%, but again, we're conservative, so we go with that number as just part of budgeting. So that's a breakdown. So on the left, you have your revenues, and by statute, the revenues need to equal the expenditures, so it's a balanced budget. So that's why you'll see those two columns, they both total up to the 278 million.
Could I just ask a question? So we budget at 95%, but during the year, you may be getting taxes in at a higher rate, say 1% or 2% more. Do you allocate that money separately, or you just put it in reserves, or does it just come in and just go in the fund?
Well,
Do you cull out that money beyond the 95%?
yes, there's two different things. So you have your regular collections where we anticipate the 95%, and that's what we budget. So if it could come in that way, or if it's delinquent, it'll appear in the delinquent line item where, like for instance, I think this year we had maybe $1 million in delinquent taxes that finally got paid. So we have a separate revenue line item for those delinquent taxes. But so the answer to it, I guess, is yes. It'll be either in what we anticipate to get as part of the regular taxes above 95%, and then if it's prior year, it'll be in the delinquent. But we look at those revenues as we're preparing the budget to say, okay, we didn't anticipate having this extra $1 million, so what can it go towards? Well, it goes towards helping shore up our reserves. It goes to filling those gaps. The same with, we look at our department budgets and say, okay, how much did, maybe general services not use this year? Well, they've got, $100,000 left over at year end. So now we're already anticipating what it's going to cost them to get through the year. And we have an estimate of what we think we can collect from all of the departments in the general fund on the board side. So we're constantly looking at that as we're building the budget for next year to see if there's an opportunity to either decrease the millage. Again, it's about how much money do we need to fulfill the obligation that we have and the commitment and the services that we provide, rather than just look at the property valuation as an increase opportunity to spend money. Is there a way to reduce it, and how can we reduce it or reallocate? That makes sense?
Yeah, it makes sense, but it still doesn't answer the ultimate question I have, which is this. At the beginning of the year now, when we went back to reserves, we're allocating 5 million something for the general reserves, whatever it was. I can go back and look at it. But during the year, you take in more money than the 95%. So right now, you said at this point in time, there's $2.7 million in the contingency reserves. Now, is any of that 2.7 million, in other words, you started with 5,609,000, 769. So you budgeted for that. So is the amount that's left in reserves, that money plus additional funds that have come in during the year, minus whatever we used for reserves?
We don't typically add money back into the reserves.
So
You start the reserves at the beginning of the year, and
Right.
it takes board action to either put money
Yeah,
in
yeah,
there
right,
or
right.
take it out. So we have not put any money back in the reserves. So when I say that we collected maybe an extra $1 million in taxes, it's sitting in an account, in a fund. It has not been recognized. It's unrecognized or unrealized revenue. It has not been accounted for. It doesn't get accounted until the end of the year when we close our books, and then we
Move it
determine,
forward.
then we move it. But we anticipate that we're going to have it, and that's why we
Yeah.
look at that for when we're determining how much do we need for next year. And so like when we started the budget process early on, we had like a $6 million gap. To help fill that gap is things like that, where now all of a sudden we have an extra $1 million. And then if you start looking at things and maybe you've got an extra 100,000 here or
I'm just wondering,
50,000.
I'm getting into how you account for it. I'm just trying to make sure I understand. I got it.
No problem.
That's good.
No problem. So then we talk about, what is a fund? So we have a lot of different funds that make up our total budget. But basically, a fund is just an accounting or reporting tool that, accounts for all of the fiscal activities of a certain revenue or an expenditure. And so when you look at our total budget, it's made up of two parts. So you have your governmental funds, which are used to account for tax-supported governmental activities. And then you've got your proprietary funds, which are comprised of really two types. You have your enterprise and then your internal service fund. So, that's how we look at things when we have the different buckets of money. So then we'll take a look at, this is a breakdown of your total budget with all funds broken down by fund. So you've got your general fund, your special revenue, your debt service, capital projects, and then those two other proprietary, your enterprise and your internal service fund. And then this is a look at your ad valorem or your property tax revenues for next year. Based on the current millage rate, along with any debt service or voter-approved items that are on there.
And these numbers are still the 95%?
We budget it at 95% for the taxes on the revenue side. But if you look, the total there is, let me take a look real quick. The property taxes, that 114,5 16 that you see at the top, that's the 95%. So that is at the 95%, the 114. So what you're seeing on your screen there is 95% of what
Okay. We're always using that 95%.
correct.
Okay.
And it's really just to be conservative. You don't want to, I guess, count your chickens before they hatch, so.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
We just try to be conservative, so. And then this is just a breakdown of your ad valorem, looking at it from last year to this year. That's that $14 million increase. And again, that's based on a slight reduction in millage. And then this is a look at your general fund revenues by category, with property taxes being the largest amount. And then you've got that, what we call cash carry forward, the amount that will move from the current fiscal year into next year. So when you talked about the, how much money do we bring forward, this is a roll-up of your reserves. It's a roll-up of any maybe unspent funds by the departments. It's all part of that cash carry forward, gets rolled up, and then it just gets reallocated. And so here's a look at the general fund revenue history from fiscal year 21 to our tentative budget for 24. So the top 6 items are what are considered the major general fund revenues, and then you'll see the total where it's bolded. That's just a total of the ones above it, and then you've got the remaining or smaller amounts below it that make up the other part of the general fund revenues. And then here's a look at the general fund expense by function, just broken out by where that money is going to be allocated. Got about 50% roughly for BOCC departments. You've got your other constitutionals, and then it's got the sheriff, inmate, and bailiff, and then your amount being held back for reserves and debt service. And then this is just a look at the expense history, again, going back to fiscal year 21 through the tentative for fiscal year 24. And I mentioned it earlier, but although it seems high, the jump for the BOCC departments, that $15 million increase, in reality, there's $10 million of that is included as part of the capital projects. So that's why it seems a little maybe inflated. It also includes the amount that we do for the cash carry forward, as well as ARPA funding and some other items. So that's why it seems a little high. And then I believe somebody mentioned CRAs earlier at the beginning of this, but so your CRAs or your community redevelopment, we have a total of 4 of them in the county, and so when they were established, you had kind of like a base value of what that property or what that area was worth. Well, that kind of gets frozen, and so as those areas start to improve or their tax value increases, the difference between that base value and whatever that new value is, you end up giving money back to each one of these government entities for that tax amount, the difference between that base and the new value. So this is just, and they all have differing end times of when they end. I think, I don't have the dates on all of them, but I think I looked at Palm Coast, and that one I think runs till 2035, I believe. And that's really the town center and then the portion along Bulldog and portions of 100 there as part of that redevelopment area. But these, you will be paying the entities this money back until those are done.
I thought we got rid of some of the town center property. Did that have any effect on this the last 2 or 3 years?
No, we had property in there that we were having to pay CDDs and stuff, but that property we sold. The properties within town center are still covered by this until 2035.
Okay, so it's less money out, but not here.
We, the county, so when we collect these taxes.
No, when we sold the property.
Oh, yes, we got money back for the sale of the land, for the purchase of the land, but that doesn't help this. This is an ongoing
Okay.
payment that we have to pay each year to the cities.
Are there restrictions on what Palm Coast can do with that money?
Has to be used within that area. So when
Okay.
they develop these CRA areas, the money has to be used within there. So typically, it'll go back in the way of maybe road improvements, it could be stormwater, it could be lighting, it could be landscape. There's certain restrictions on how the money's used, but it has to benefit that particular area. It can't be used somewhere else. It can't be like a pot of money that then's going to go to something else unrelated. So, yeah, they do. They have each one of these, when they would have gotten approved by the county, each one of them has a plan, its own plan on how that money is intended to be used. Talks about the duration. I know they report back to us each year. They give us a copy of their financials and stuff like that as part of that reporting requirement. But we're obligated to give them that. So even though our money that looks like, we're getting a lot of money, we're paying back money to the cities for those CRA payments. So. And then this is a look at the proposed millage rates for next year. As I stated in the beginning, it is a slight decrease from the previous year. This would make it our third consecutive year with a reduction in millage. I know we had 1 year where it was flat prior to that, and then I think it was the previous year to that was also a reduction. But so when you look at the 5 years, you had actually 4 of reductions, 1 where it was held flat. But as far as consecutive, this would be our third consecutive year of a reduction in millage. And that is based on what we've presented today. So we're able to balance the budget, reduce the millage slightly, and fulfill the needs of the constitutionals and filling some of those gaps. We only have a couple things left to talk about, and the first one being Daytona North. Daytona North is a service district. It was set up back in the early 90s, and it came through a court ruling where the Daytona North subdivision was being developed and improved, but at the time, a judge had presiding over this had stated that the county was not obligated to maintain or construct streets or other improvements within that Daytona North subdivision, which is why the Daytona North Service District, that front foot assessment, was created. Now, this was created many years ago. It has not increased since it was originally done back in 92 and 93. Prior to 92, there was a different rate, but we have not raised it or increased it since the 92 or 93. When you look at the cost of providing the current level of service out there, it's actually closer to about $750,000, $760,000. So it's only covering about a third of the cost right now, based on the current level of service that's being provided out there. So this area is being subsidized by other funds. So this is an area that we had talked about. I mean, ideally, it should probably be tripled to provide the amount needed to maintain the area, which would be about $779,000. However, we understand the impact that that would have on residents, so that's not why we're suggesting doing that. But This rate, as I said, has been the same since 92 and 93. It's been 30 plus years without, having an increase. Everything's gone up in 30 years. So this is an area that staff is recommending doing an increase. When you look at that, it would go from that 58 cents up to $1.16. I think when we looked at it, the average resident was paying about $80 a year towards their front foot assessment, so it would go from 80 to about 160 a year. So that is one area that is being considered as part of the development of the budget. And again, it's really to maintain the current level of service that's being provided out there. I think, sometimes we hear from residents they would like a lot more than what's being provided now. Others feel that, they're not getting, or maybe they don't want more. They're fine with what they have. But again, it's about maintaining the roads in a safe condition. We're not asking about going back and, doing, some other work out there, but it's really just to maintain the roads in their present condition. I think arguably you could say that in the past.
Pardon me, Heidi. Would you all please keep your comments to yourself, please? Thank you.
I
Continue.
think arguably you could say that as we work with FDOT to pave the roads out in Daytona North, and if there is a local match requirement, the Daytona North Assessment District should be the one covering the match. Now, the county has not done that, nor are we suggesting doing that. But anytime there are road improvements out there that we're putting in, that local match is being provided, if it's required, is being provided by county government and not Daytona North. Again, I'm not suggesting that we're going to increase it to cover that gap, but this request for an increase is strictly just for the maintenance side of things. When you look at maintaining the amount of road area that you have out there, what they contribute is $260,000 to maintain the network of roads. It's costing us somewhere between $750,000, $760,000. It's triple that number. We're not proposing tripling it. We're proposing an increase. It's probably long overdue. When I came here 18 years ago and I worked in public works, they talked about raising it then, and they haven't raised it. So again, this isn't an area that, ideally, if we could, we would not raise it, but we have to because other funds are subsidizing it.
Chair?
Yes.
May I?
Yes.
Yes, so thank you, Heidi, for that overview, but I just have a couple questions, maybe from staff to answer. So I'd be remiss if I didn't start by saying that, we are under pressure to create, workforce housing, affordable housing, and this is one of the last areas of that. So we should, in theory, be lessening the burdens on affordable housing and actually incentivizing those areas so they remain affordable. But outside of that, I was able to procure from budget what is charged in this MSTU. And I reviewed it over the weekend. I have some really concerns I think that we need to address before we review this proposal. Finance provided me the 2021-2020 cost to maintain this district. And looking at it, I think that there are some disproportionate charges that we should review. And talking with legal, I'm going to just kind of go through it. I know you gentlemen have not received an actual breakdown of what's charged out there, but let me kind of give you a couple ideas of what's going on. So they are charged, which I don't think anyone doesn't agree with here, that for the maintenance and construction of the streets, and that's by court order that we can charge them for that. Some of these charges, though, in here that I do have to question. So they're charged a trip fee for our men to go out into the area. They're charged a trip fee. They are charged a fee for the labor, which is not in question. My biggest concern here is they are actually charged FEMA rates for the use of the equipment. So we charge them for a 2014, we charge them a trip rate for someone to go out there, The cost of the sign, let's say they're putting a sign up, we charge them for the use of the labor, which I understand, and the cost of the material. But then on top of that, we charge them for the use of the equipment. So there are charges in here, let's say if they do a project with a dump truck, where the dump truck runs, we charge them $3,000 for the use of the dump truck for that particular project for the day. So my question, and I think I need answers to, is one, should they be, as an ad valorem payer and an unincorporated Flagler County resident, be charged for the use of the equipment that they pay into the fund for the purchase of the fleet? And then on top of that, should they be charged at a FEMA rate, which when I read those FEMA rates, and I'm going to need some feedback from legal or for legal to look into it, should we be using FEMA rates, which are supposed to be charged during declared disasters, to charge the actual equipment costs? Because if you look at the 2020 and the 2021 numbers, the cost of labor was $211,000 out there, and the equipment charge was $282,000. So more than we are charging for the labor. So I'm wondering if we're getting a $700,000 number, and the majority of it is an equipment charge that's based on FEMA rates on an item that these people have paid into the ad valorem tax to purchase. And is that right, equitable, fair?
And I can probably help answer some of that. Like I said, I came here 18 years ago. I started in Public Works. When you look at the FEMA rate, I guess I'll start there. When you look at the FEMA rate is the use of the equipment. It's supposed to be the wear and tear, the cost of insurance, the cost of fuel. It's all of those costs wrapped up into an hourly rate that is industry standard. That's why it's used. It's been used since I've been here. It's no different than if you had a contractor, a business running it, which when I came here 18 years ago, they actually had town halls out there and they had looked at bringing a contractor in to provide the service, not having the county do it. The cost of a contractor doing it way back when was closer to $1 million. That was way back when, and we don't charge nearly that amount. We're not trying to make a profit. We're trying to break even. When you talk about general fund ad valorem taxpayers, that would be great if ad valorem general fund dollars were actually going into paying for the fleet or the fuel or any of those, but it's not. It's paid for out of gas tax and other revenues, not general fund ad valorem. So it's set up as a true enterprise fund. When you look at Public Works or Road and Bridge, they're not funded and supported by tax dollars. That's not how they're set up. They are what is considered a enterprise fund. Therefore, it's looking at somebody like a cost of doing business. You cannot take an asset that is intended to be used in one area and not recoup the cost or for that usage. So yeah, they are being charged for travel time. They are being charged their labor rate, their equipment charges, and all of those things, because that is a full cost of providing that level of service to that project or that entity. The FEMA rates, I think we're using a low rate. I think that they need to be updated. I think they're using maybe the 2016 rates. There are newer rates. But that, again, it's something that is typically the industry standard when you look at it. It's the cost of the equipment, and there's different factors for each type of equipment. So like a dump truck, it's not a flat rate for a dump truck. It goes by how many cubic yards, and it's a sliding scale. So if it's, a 12-yard dump truck, it might be this rate. If it's an 18-yard dump truck, it's a higher rate. So there's a breakdown on what type of truck. Even your pickup trucks, is it a half-ton, a quarter-ton, three-quarter ton, a 1 ton? They all have different rates. Is it a 4x4 or is it, two-wheel drive? But those are all industry standards that are used. And so even if you contracted it out, because we don't have to do it, we could contract it out and completely be done by a contractor, and then whatever that cost is, put that out there. But I would tend to believe it would be significantly higher. Again, we're not trying to make money. We're just trying to, recoup the cost of doing business.
Yeah, but as a board, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Hadid, we can control what gets charged out of that MTSU. So even though we say it's for roads and it says other improvements, we have that ability to say, you know, I don't want to charge the FEMA rate because it seems excessive. It's more than the labor itself. But that's, you know, you're saying right now it's using 2016 rates. If we roll to the 2021, it's going to go up significantly on them. So this MTSU is just going to continue to, you know, it should be tripled according to the numbers that you're using here. But now we're saying, well, you know, we're using 16 to be nice to them, and we're going to use 2021. You're looking at this rate going 4 or 5 times higher than what it is right now.
Not that we're using the 2016 rate to be nice to them, just to clarify that. It's just that our system hasn't been updated. So as we move into the new Tyler software system, we will be updating those rates to mirror whatever the latest numbers are.
The equipment charges are higher than the labor charges for the work on almost all of these jobs that are billed out there. So my question to the board is, you know, yeah, it hasn't been raised in 30 years, but the equipment, we, you know, they do, whether we say it or not, I mean, you know, the equipment is something something we can control how much is charged. And the rate seems excessive for the use of this equipment for that area. I mean, they're charged to pick up a dead animal out there. They're charged for the canal cleaning, which those canals, you could argue, benefit the entire county to be dredged because all flow west. So I just think the equipment charges, when you go through this, is excessive. It's double the amount of the actual labor there. And I think that's something this board could ease and look at when we look at it. And again, I go back to, you know, this is the workforce housing for Flagler County, and we don't do a lot to create workforce housing. And just, you know, this is something that, you know, we could control the equipment charge.
Mr. Fito, does this enterprise fund, is it on the budget sheet that we had 2 enterprise funds. We had the airport, and then we had the other enterprise. Is that where this is included?
It would be one of
where that's
your-
established?
It would be one of your enterprise funds. So, and again, you know, it's up to the pleasure of the board, so certainly you can do whatever you want, but if you would have to find funding in some other way to be able to fill the gap, and it's not built into
I
the
understand
budget.
enterprise funds. It's you figure out what it costs per hour or per half hour or per day or whatever to operate the equipment, send people, whatever. I understand that. So this is the budgetary process that we as a staff have gone through to figure out for that cost center, if you will, what we charge everybody. Correct? We have an enterprise fund type arrangement. So if they have to go out to do something else in the county, that's what we charge.
It's the same rate. Yeah, we
same
don't
rate.
have 2 different rates.
No.
We don't have a rate for them and a rate
No,
for somebody else.
that's
And
right.
we can only set up our system to have one rate, because if we're going to submit for any FEMA reimbursement, that's the rate. And similarly, whenever we have capital projects or maybe grant, this is the same mechanism that we use to capture those costs of labor and equipment
Right.
for grants or reimbursements. So
Yeah, I just want to make clear that this is not a special case. This is
No,
what we charge everybody.
I think that when this was created 30, 40 years ago, it was a rural area. And I think that we could be prioritizing SCOP and scrap out here to get them out of this MTSU, if that's a possibility. But when I go through these charges, I mean, some of them are just extreme. And the rationale behind this levy, to me, it's completely inequitable for the end product that they get out there. So to me, I think you're right. We have to find the money from somewhere else if we were to ever adjust it. This should have been incrementally adjusted to go with inflation and things over the years. Why 30 years we woke up in the middle of all this and decided to double or triple on them, to me, when we're dying to create and maintain workforce housing, is just, I just don't think we should be balancing the backs of this budget on Daytona North. You know, it's like not a hill to die on to me. So I'm just a little confused, especially when I know that we purchase this equipment and could have some control over the cost of the equipment. I mean, to charge somebody, $60 to use a 2014 F-150 to stick a sign out there is crazy to me. So that's my take on it. To double, triple, now you know that 16 is not going to cut it for a FEMA rate. Eventually, it's going to have to be a higher FEMA rate to charge it. Just seems inequitable. I mean, that's the best way I can describe it. And we should be working to get those roads paved quicker for them out there through the scrap and scrap.
And through the scrap and SCOP, that is the only funding that you have for any of your county roads, not just Daytona North. So when you look at all of your county roads collectively, you've got huge challenges and huge needs. That's why we're going to talk about it next Monday, because there is no other funding. We don't have a dedicated funding for any of our roads, not just Daytona North specific, but anywhere Flagler County. We rely only on FDOT and whatever funding we can get from them, and there is no local match, whether it's gas tax, general fund, some other municipal taxing thing, or whatever we want to call it. There is no other funding. And I'm not suggesting, I mean, the same level of service that they get now, whether it's the 2016 rate, FEMA rate, or the new rate, we're not looking at changing or deviating from what we're doing. We're just trying to fill the gap on how much we're subsidizing. So even if the rate went up, we're trying to capture closer to whatever it's costing. And looking at a $260,000 cost that was established 30 years ago and never increasing it for inflation, fuel, cost of wages, and everything else, even the cost of the equipment and the materials, it seems, we're just trying to increase it, albeit, it's not going to cover itself, but we're just trying to incrementally, rip the Band-Aid off and try to get closer to where it should be, because keeping it at 260,000 isn't going to work.
Yeah, well, to me, the economy is the wrong economy to rip the Band-Aid off in right now, especially in their region.
Can I, Mr. Adid, what's our legal responsibility here? I don't really know the,
Because it is an MSTU, you have the discretion to set the rate and the budget for that MSTU and how those funds are allocated and spent. You are permitted to identify the formula or standards you want to use for charges to be assessed against that account for these purposes.
so when this originated, this arose from a settlement or a
No, just very briefly.
Yeah.
The developer that had acquired this property attempted to record a map of the lots to sell them without submitting them to our zoning department for compliance with the subdivision regulations. The county sued to compel, they sued to compel the clerk to record them. The board instructed the clerk, no, do not record them. They haven't been through our subdivision regs, which, by the way, would have provided the standards for roads and drainage, et cetera. Court ruled that because the developer chose not to go through the county's process, and the developer had a right to file with the clerk whatever he wanted at his own risk, therefore, the county would not be responsible for any improvements because he attempted to avoid them by not filing with the subdivision regs. It was the consequence of not going through the subdivision regulation process. We wouldn't be having this discussion today.
So as a board, what he's saying is we could control the cost of the equipment. The equipment is the expense here. What we bill them for it's the chunk, in 2020 and 2021, it was more than the cost of the labor itself. you know? And so I
But
don't know
Leanne,
if there's a,
that would affect every job throughout the year that that equipment has to go on. So we would be, because you can't charge separate, it's got to be the same charge. So we would be losing money throughout the year, big time. We wouldn't have the money to replace the equipment. So,
we have
I mean,
the,
that would be a hit, the entire budget.
well, we have the ability to this should have been incrementally, walked in, not doubled, then tripled, and then, whatever it's going to be, especially in this economy, especially in a time when we're trying to say we support affordable and workforce housing. And if you go out there, a lot of those people are not, they're on fixed income. They are our service industry, and it's a sensitive matter. I totally understand it, and I know that we're not obligated to do what we do out there, but, I would hope that we could come up with a solution that would, be more equitable.
Does the MSTU regulations require us to match expenses to revenue?
No.
So
In other words, you can choose to
well, I guess it doesn't
subsidize
because
as
we haven't
much.
been doing it.
You can choose to subsidize as much of the real cost above the special assessment collected as the board determines.
You would just have to answer to every other taxpayer in Flagler County and explain to them why you're doing that, why you're favoring one group of taxpayers over another.
That's certainly one way to look at it.
Well, the other thing, though, could we not take the fleet that we're retiring out, which we've done out there? We took a tractor, right? And we said we allocate it to Daytona North instead of putting it, out. That way they're not charged for the use of that tractor. Could we not do that with some of our fleet that costs them more as we get rid of the fleet?
There was one drag tractor that they had moved out there that they no longer charge them for. But moving forward, some of the equipment may be a leased equipment because we're getting away from purchase. So it's not like we're going to have equipment surplus that we're going to be able to stick out there. And it's different types of equipment that they use. It's not just, one type, so.
It just seems like this could be taken back by staff and solution to where it's not, a double and a triple and a, not right now in this economy. That's just my take on it, but find something else where we can balance the budget out on.
Mr. Dance?
Thank you. Well, I think part of getting through this is going to combine getting trust with the residents and transparency in the process. So it's, in hearing this, the first thought I have is trust in the numbers is going to come through, in my opinion, going out for an RFP on the processes to get current rates. We're not going to, the rhetoric that what we're hearing is not going to be solved until we're able to compare it to market rates. And that's the only way you're going to do that is through an RFP. Find out companies that, and itemize and put together an RFP so that we have the current rates. Because at that point, we can compare them to the process we're doing, which is through the FEMA reimbursement rates. There's logic in the fact that you have to account for not just the man hours, but the entire operation.
Can I ask you, do you mean, in other words, if we were to outsource all the maintenance, you want to see what the rates would be from the
Correct.
private sector?
Right, so based on the lineal footage of roadways, of signs, I think you have to have a market rate. And then we can look at discounts of market rate at that point. And, kudos to us and for the residents to come out, but to talk about it now after 30 years of inactivity, continuing to bury our head isn't going to make it any better. So yeah, there's going to be some hard questions. But there is some accountability on the resident side to acknowledge that after 30 years, there's some adjustments that are going to have to be made. And I just think, this may not be an immediate resolution today, because I think there's longstanding trust issues that are going to have to be overcome which will be solved with this type of discussion with the residents. Some oversight to the process. So I just, we're going to have to come to some rational market rate of reimbursements for the time that's going on out there, because everybody's going to have to come to an agreement on what those rates are going to be as much as we can. And some things that I heard maybe there is in some of these things, say the drainage canals, to where once we complete the stormwater plan, maybe we can get the stormwater consultant to possibly look at that. Because if we do have a significant portion of the unincorporated county draining through these, maybe the residents that are in the Mondex are not paying for 100% of those drainage canal cleanings. I mean, that makes sense. But the road frontages, the maintenance of the roads, I think an itemized list of all the things that go into that, the charges, is going to have to be discussed in public, so everybody knows what's going into the allocations, what's going into the expenses, and an acknowledgement that we are going to have to bring this up to a new level somehow. And if it's incrementally achieved, I'm okay with that, because, again, we are making amends for a long process. But I don't know if it's going to be solved today. I think, and may not agree with my thoughts, but.
No,
Well, I
just-
think the issue is what can we do? And what we can do is adjust the assessment. We cannot adjust and give everybody a spare, okay,
Right.
because you live in the Mondex, you don't have to pay for this.
Right.
We can't do
Well,
that. We can't do that.
No,
So the only thing we can adjust, the five of us, is the front foot assessment. We control that number, and it's currently 58 cents. So at some point later today, we will have to decide what that number is, whether it's 1.16 per foot, or whether it's an increase of a quarter of that or something. We're going to have to resolve that. And if we do, then we got to figure out where to get the money that we're taking out of the budget by doing that. Okay? So I think that is what we as a board have to do. And I think when we adjourn and go into special session, that's where we're going to do that. We're going to make that decision. And I think everybody here would agree with that's when we need to discuss. And Andy, you bring up some good points, but I think at some point, I think that front foot assessment has to go up. How much? Maybe 1.16 is too much. But we have to start incrementally improving that. So let's reserve that discussion till the special session where we're actually going to put a number there.
right. That's in between now and the special session, as Mr. Hadid pointed out, we as a board can control what items go into the MSTU. So like Andy said, it's been 30 years since people said, should they be charged for the canals 100%? Should they be charged for animal cleanup? So is there a chance we can have staff itemize what items are being charged? And then just a holistic review of that MSTU to say, should that item be charged into the, for an unincorporated taxpayer, or, is it something, that's the question. Are we charging the right items? It's been 30 years since that review was done. And then, later down the road when they do the stormwater, should they be paying the full cleanage of the canals? So if that could be just an exercise asked of staff just to itemize what's in there, and does it still belong there with them? That would be a nice to help us figure out the number.
We'll give them about 30 minutes to do that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, shouldn't they
And
just give
before
us this
they,
on Friday?
I'm sorry,
Mr. Adid?
before they do that, I have to step away because I have an out-of-county appointment. Sean will
Right.
be sitting here. I want to just give you a couple of things, not to influence your decision whatsoever, but a board informed is a board that is more capable ultimately of making a decision that you're comfortable with. 1983 assessment amount was for the roads. When 1992 came, it was believed that paving the roads would reduce the level of maintenance because you're dragging sand roads. You all know that argument. And so there was a belief by the residents of Daytona North, which was supported by the county, that the county would begin paving roads. And so that was one of the reasons why the assessment was increased to 58. There was an attempt in 2004, I was not county attorney then, and then in 2006 to raise this assessment rate, and the Daytona North community dissuaded the board from making any increases at that time. So this is the first time since 2006 that we have revisited that issue. The only other thing I wanted to mention was, it's not because I have this intrinsic knowledge, it's because I received a communication from the county engineer that reminded me that FDOT has maintenance contracts to third parties, and that may be a reference point for those kinds of equipment charges and those other kinds of charges. But I don't know. I just wanted to let you all know that so that you wouldn't miss out on that information.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Moylan is very up to speed on this. We've both been working on these issues for some time, and he'll be able to give you good guidance. Thank you.
All right, if we're done with that, Ms. Petito, we can move on, please.
Okay, so next up is the mandatory residential solid waste assessment. This is a pass-through, but it is one of the assessments that we levy through the tax bill collection. This is a service that's provided to residents within the designated area. We had a previous resolution that had capped the costs at $300, which was the maximum cost. That was back in 2007. And up until recently, we've exceeded that cap, so we've gone out and we've redone the resolution and the ordinance on this, but this is just one of the discussion items that you're going to have later today. Again, it's a pass-through based on whatever the cost to provide service is. So I just wanted to share that with you. And then the last thing that I have is just to give you an update on the helicopter replacement. We talked about it at a prior commission meeting where you had authorized us to go ahead and move forward. There was a conversation that pursued that there was a comment about whether or not this would be equipped with a FLIR system or some sort of infrared detection system for law enforcement. At the time, the previous quote that we had did not include it, but we went back, we talked to the sheriff to see if there are any grants available. He was not aware of any grants that were currently available for this. We went back to the manufacturer, and I have to give credit to the fire department, their staff, who was able to negotiate with the manufacturer to get that cost down. So this is a revised cost, which does include the sheriff's equipment. The total cost has not changed. It's actually a little bit cheaper than the original proposal that I had given you. The equipment to do that infrared system, and then the sheriff had asked if we could look at doing what they call a downlink, which would provide live feed. So like in the event of maybe it's a pursuit or a chase, if the helicopter was up following the vehicle, it's got a download link that they could see what the helicopter sees. There would be no delay. The cost of the equipment was upwards of about 700,000. Through negotiations at the fire department with the manufacturer, we've got our mechanic pilot, Todd Whaley, who will be overseeing this project as far as all of the add-on or all of the equipment by breaking it out between the cost of the helicopter before the mission, we call it mission equipment, so the frame, the additional airframe equipment, which is like your dual controls, your cable cutter, engine wash kit, things like that. So the cost before the mission equipment, when you're looking at this, that 3.6 million, that goes to Airbus. So we need to purchase it through Airbus, and then it's going to go to another company called Wysong to do what's called the mission equipment. That's there's an AC component, there's the downlink, there's all of the infrared equipment for law enforcement use. In order to bring that cost down, we have Todd, our pilot now, kind of overseeing this project. So the net difference, I don't have the number in front of me, but it's right around what I had told you before. The only difference is that the original thing was we were going to cut one check to Airbus. Doing it this way and cutting out the two different things and having Todd be involved in project management saves us money, and it offsets the cost of putting that equipment on there that's needed for law enforcement. But in doing it, the Airbus, we have to give them 20% down, which isn't a problem. We already anticipated that. But then the Wysong material, the 1.6 million, they require 50% down to buy the equipment, and then they would expect the other 50%. It's just more of a timing of things, so I just wanted to bring it to your attention. You have an agenda item at the next special meeting to go ahead and approve the 1.5 million coming out of helicopter reserves for this purpose. The only thing that it does, because the total cost, I think, did increase slightly. Your debt service payment, I know that we talked about 250,000 was what we'd always earmarked. I think this payment went from like 222 to 237 now over the 10-year period. So it is a slight increase to get $700,000 worth of equipment added on there at a discount. So I don't know if that makes sense to you or if you have any questions.
I had one question on that.
Yeah, Mr. Sullivan?
If we had not gotten this reduction because of work we're going to be able to do in-house, or what the gentleman's name who's going to help out, how were we going to pay for the additional law enforcement sensors?
We would have taken delivery of an aircraft for roughly the same price as this. It wouldn't have had the equipment.
We didn't say at the last meeting, I thought the sheriff had said he'd be willing to pay for the law enforcement equipment.
I talked to the sheriff after the meeting. Actually, Jorge and I called him to talk about possibilities of either them paying for it or a grant. And we talked for like a week, back and forth with what could they find out. And it was determined that they didn't have the money to do it and there wasn't a grant specific for that type of equipment. So then that had us thinking, okay, well, what else can we do? And so when we met with the fire department, they got to work with trying to negotiate with the manufacturer, how do we bring the costs down? So if we shift some of the responsibility or burden onto our staff to oversee the project, there's a cost savings. It would require our pilot to fly up to the plant 4 times throughout the construction of the aircraft. He would then be involved also in putting on the equipment with this other manufacturer or company that would put on that mission
Well,
equipment.
how do we have the feeling that the sheriff was willing to pay for part of this? Did
Based
he
on-
say he was?
Based on the conversation that took place last budget year, conversation that he had with our fire chief, and I think the sheriff actually spoke here at a budget workshop or hearing last year when he was talking about the need for the replacement of the equipment. It was believed that there was either funding or grant possibility or something. It's not required for
No, I agree, it's
our
not required.
purpose.
At the meeting when we approved the helicopter, I was under the impression that the sheriff was going to maybe be able to pay for the additional sensor equipment. Since we couldn't afford it in the deal we had made, it was going to have to add it on later.
Which is something you could do, but we were trying to, whether.
No,
if he-
it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, if he can't get a grant for it, we're going to
This is
fund
the way
it
to
one
do
way
it.
or another. So we figured out a way to get what we needed.
Yeah, I know. It's taking our hours of our guy, though, to make the difference.
It is,
Okay.
but we're able to get it done, so. I just wanted to give you an update because it does change things. Now we're dealing with two different vendors, one that we have to buy the helicopter from, and then the other one is to secure the other equipment, so. It's just a little different than what I had originally told you we were going to do, so I just wanted to update you with that. And as far as the tentative budget portion, that concludes what I have. I think there was guidance provided with you with convening the special meeting, ending this one, and, calling to order a new meeting.
Commissioners, I'd like a motion to adjourn with a 5-minute interlude and then reconvene the special meeting. If someone would make that motion, I'd appreciate it.
So moved.
Yeah, comment.
Oh, yeah, my apologies. We'll now open up for public comment on the budget.
Gotcha.
I practiced this, and I'm just
Please, over to the microphone, please, the microphone, please, and then identify yourself.
Pamela Andrews. I have been a property owner in Daytona North, community volunteer for many agencies here since 2006. Many call me when they are in need of food and other situations. I was here to learn and hold off any increase to the already struggling poor, being one myself who lives with low to no means. We are all under, especially with the current administration in DC. Please keep that in mind. At 90% can barely pay, eat, and keep a roof over our heads. So adding more tax will create more debt, period. 2, also I want to bring to attention to what myself and others have reported and shared great concern for junkyards, shanty towns, and pop-up pantries not being regulated or mandated for proper storage, food handling laws. Told things would be taken care of and still no results. Not only an eyesore, disgusting, filthy public nuisance, but also public health and safety issues. Sheriff Staley has done his job removing human and drug element, and now the county needs to hold some kind of responsibility to clean up those properties. If nothing else, give me permission and I will gather a crew to clean it up. Currently, my concern is at the corner of Avocado and Ironwood, but there's other properties there. Our sheriff's department has gone above and beyond to clean up drug houses and working daily to keep it up. Now we need to make it tolerable. I have photos if you want to see them, or you can take a drive out and I will meet you and take you on a tour. 3, now it seems like for years I have called for, informed, requested, suggested that Charles Solano be audited. Too much there is going on behind the scenes, and as it seems that monies given through here, grants and donations, not distributed equally, financially or quality of food. The pantry at Hidden Trails, where the majority of the county's population food insecurity reigns, are always lacking. And now, 2, have popped up not being regulated or monitored to follow with good standards to make up for his not doing his job or what he's paid to do. At least 5 times I know or more in the past few months, it has been completely canceled. Supposedly the truck has broke down, as if he himself could not deliver in his vehicle, get a truck or trucks from his congregation, or how about going to Penske, U-Haul, or Home Depot to rent one? I mean, come on, he's no longer giving food access in Flagler. first Friday at the fairgrounds and should have thousands more to spend. Like his buddy and fellow con man, Joe Mullins, salesman selling salvation and threatening people to help him or get no food.
Thank you.
It's
Thank
time
you.
for checks and
That's enough.
balances and time for
Ma'am.
actually feed the poor and hungry in Flagler County.
We got the message, okay?
This leaves Royal Palms, Education Way, and other more capable to buy food. I had
please.
told you I was a little over. Look at all the high-end vehicles waiting in the line there to get multiple bags of food while the residents of Daytona North go without. I do hope and pray that with all here and who all are here, that will take into consideration what I have said. Again, Solano and even the county of Flagler bank accounts as well be audited. Seems a whole lot of people in our payroll doing absolutely nothing. Thank you.
We don't appreciate you not following the rules, ma'am.
I
Please.
commented that I was
That's
a
not,
little over when I started.
that's not a little over. Sorry. Next speaker.
Just come up to.
No, sorry. If you want to speak, come up to the platform. Well, whatever you need to say, please come up here and identify yourself and say what you got to say. Over here, microphone.
Okay. I'm Ann Krager.
Okay.
And I've lived in the Mondex 2.5 years off and on.
Okay?
Anyway, a lot of the individuals that wanted to be present today are at work, and they all ask if I'd ask if we could do an evening meeting so they can come because they work. And there's 11 people here from the Mondex, if even that. And I've been real involved in my town where I came from, but, you know, in fairness to everybody, we need to be here to listen so we can give input. Thank you.
Thank you.
Will you guys consider doing that
We'll consider it.
before you make a decision about what
No.
you're going to do?
No.
No?
We'll
Why?
consider it this afternoon.
Okay, well,
Okay.
because all the people that are involved are not here to listen and to give input.
I understand.
And they also weren't notified about the meeting. I saw it on Facebook, but thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, I'm Judy Long. I am a homeowner. My property's completely paid off and everything. I just don't understand how come, after we've already had an increase last year on our taxes, so it was a large amount, that you're going to triple this year. Are they tripling the amount that it is per square footage in town also?
What town?
In Bunnell Town? Is that going to town, or
That's
is it
not
just
us.
for, no, it's just for us?
That's not us.
Well, I'm really thinking that we're getting taxation without representation, because half of the stuff that's on there involves Bunnell Town. It does not involve Bunnell Mondex, okay? So that's not correct at all. A lot of the stuff you've got on there doesn't make us a bit of difference whatsoever. And it's being added to us. But all of a sudden, you want to, like, we have to pay extra for this, because we have to contain our area. If we're gonna contain our area, why don't we just become a town ourselves and be represented by ourselves? It doesn't make sense, because we're getting taxation without representation. We don't care what goes on Flagler Beach. That's a tourist, we care as much about that as a tourist does. And the tourists, they pay whenever they go over there, well, we do too. We don't get any tax breaks because we live in Bunnell. So why should we care about what's going on over there? If they don't care what's going on us, they don't want to chip in with ours, so why should we chip in with theirs? Now, to me, that makes sense. I don't know. So if they're not going to chip in with us, well, then I really think we should separate, because it just doesn't make sense that we have to pay in. And we have to pay in for them, and then they are looking at us, no, you got to take care of your own area, but you've got to help us take care of yours. I'm sorry. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Next speaker. Yes, sir.
My name's Paul Hagestead. I just wanted a couple questions. One, the lady was talking about only getting 95% of taxes. How is that possible when 100% of the tax get paid? If they don't get paid, the property's sold at auction? And
That's
then,
a state law.
Okay, then, so they're collecting the money, so where's all that extra money coming from? Because I've actually watched the sales where there's only, say, 4,000, 5,000 owed on a tax, the property sells for 40, 50,000. Where's all that extra money? Where's it getting accounted for? First of all, another thing I'm questioning on is taxes. I get taxes gotta go up at some point, but we need to slowly go up. I moved out here a little over 3 years ago, and taxes were originally like just under 800, then it went to 900, now we're almost 1,300 now this year. Now we're talking going up again. The Mondex area is a low-income area. People can't afford that kind of, maybe some people can, but not everybody can afford that, and then now you're hurting everybody by raising. I think the money can come from somewhere else, or if we're getting double coming out taxes, we have to pay for equipment, and then now we bought the equipment, paid with the taxes, now we're paying to rent the equipment or use the equipment. I mean, there's got to be some type of accountability on all the equipment, and where all this money's coming from, stuff like that. And if we're getting charged, I don't know what any of the dollar amounts are, but if we're getting charged, say, $300 to use a truck and to go get a dead animal, maybe there might be, like Pamela said, maybe a community will come together with a group of people and go do some volunteer work to save us some money. I mean, that's some simple things to do before thinking about raising the taxes on people that can't afford. There's got to be other ways to come up with the money. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker. Hi. Wait till you get up. Okay, now say your
I'm
name.
Bonnie Turner, and I've been
Okay.
living in the Mondex for some 18 years. And today is the first day I've actually found out that this is all over a tit for tat because a developer and the county got into an argument. I can't believe that. Do any other county roads pay a frontage tax? Do any of them? You stated that, yes, it was your obligation. You all could go to your special meeting and you could put on this tax. You could also, as a council, you could also abolish this so that one little section of your county is not being done this way. We would all be using the equipment. We would all be being charged the same fees. It would all be coming out of all of our taxes. And as this gentleman over here stated, he was talking about answering to the other taxpayers. Well, they don't ask me when they need their beaches with their $1 million homes on them fixed. Do they hear me coming out of the woods arguing? No, they don't. Because we are a people. We the people. We take care of each other. We don't fight about it. We don't need to. We don't argue about it. But we can take care of the less fortunate when the less fortunate don't mind taking care of the wealthy. We do not. We need to stand on our Constitution. We need to take the pork out of the government, and we need to start helping people and families. People out there, it's sad. You go on the Swap and Talk. I'll do it sometimes once a week because of the sadness. A mother, she's saving pop cans and begging people for pop cans so she can take her children to SeaWorld. Then another one, please, is there anybody out here that knows how to fix an air conditioner? Because I don't have the money. And it's one person after another, and we don't need the government standing on our necks, taking every last penny that they can get from us. She's a wonderful chairman. She gets it. She sees it. She comes out there and mixes with us. She knows how people feel and how hard it is. Right now is the worst time. This whole country's about to implode, and our county government needs more money. I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker. Seeing no one approach, I'll bring it back to the commission.
Hey, Mr. Chair, before we adjourn,
Sure.
it's probably worth clarifying that when we have this special meeting and we talk about these rates, that they're not final, it's just the highest number that we could be at, and
Right.
there's several more opportunities to change them or have a discussion about them before September.
Exactly.
So I just want to be clear about that.
Right.
We're not deciding anything that's final today.
Agree. Anything else before we move on to the next one?
Well, it might be worth clarifying that Bunnell has nothing to do with all of this. There was
Bunnell
comments
doesn't, no.
about Bunnell, but
They have nothing to do with it.
Mondex is in the unincorporated county and not within any city limits of Bunnell. Bunnell has no jurisdiction or nothing.
Right. So. Yep. All right.
We'll get with Heidi. I'll get, if you stay around.
Okay,
we'll
we have a
talk to-
motion to adjourn. Okay, we'll reconvene in 5 minutes. We'll convene at 2:50.
The first one, and I'll be, if it's okay with the chair, just reading a suggested motion and to kind of get all the words and numbers in there in the right order, if that's okay. Motion one, request a motion to authorize the county administrator to execute the appropriate paperwork in accordance with Chapter 200 Florida statute to include a proposed general fund operating millage rate of 7.9297 mils and an ESL, environmentally sensitive land operating millage rate of 0.1250 mils for a total operating millage rate of 8.0547 mils. B, a proposed environmentally sensitive land debt service millage rate of 0.1250 mils and a debt service millage rate for the judicial center debt of 0.1546 mils. And C, establishing the date, time, and place of the first public hearing to adopt the proposed millage rates and the tentative budget to be Wednesday, September 6th, 2023 at 5:01 p.m. here in the board chambers located at the Flagler County Government Services Building, 1769 East Moody Boulevard, Building 2, Bunnell, Florida, 32110.
Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve as read.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the motion as read by Mr. Broward. We'll open it up to public comment. Anybody in the public wish to comment on those rates? Seeing no one approach, I'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioners, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes. Mr. Broward, you're up.
Mr. Chair, second motion for today is for the assessments and request the Board of County Commissioners approve the preliminary special assessment rates for FY 23 to 24 as follows, as listed on the next page, please, I think.
On the last page.
Yeah. And I could read these if you like. The Daytona North Service District, $1.16 per front foot. Again, this can be decreased over the summer if required, if desired. The Bimini Gardens Municipal Service Benefit Unit, 58 cents per front foot. Espanola Special Service District, $11.76 per special assessment unit. Rima Ridge Special Service District, $14.62 for a special assessment unit. Flagler Estates MSTU is 0. Flagler County Mandatory Solid Waste, $428.90 per residential unit. North Malacompra Drainage Basin District, $30 per parcel. Marineland Acres Drainage Basin District, $435 per developed lot and $220 per vacant lot. And Painters Hill Seawall Special Assessment District, $116.28 per front foot.
Motion to approve the preliminary special assessment rates for the fiscal year 2023-24 as read.
Been moved and seconded to approve the special assessment rates for 23 to 24 as read by Mr. Broward. Open it up to public comment, and the public wish to comment on the special rates. Seeing no one approach, I bring it back to the commission. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Motion passes 4-1.
And Mr. Chair, the third and final motion we'll ask for today is referencing the helicopter purchase. And we're asking motion to authorize a budget transfer in the amount of $1,500,000 from the general fund reserve that we've put aside for the helicopter to the flight ops division to utilize those funds.
Can you throw that back up on the screen?
Yeah.
We're transferring it from the reserve that we had set aside for the helicopter.
Mr. Chair, that's correct. So when I first started here, we put $250,000 away per year.
Right.
And it built up to $1.5 million. That's the third from the bottom there. There's 1.5 in there now. We're asking to take it out of the reserve so we can use the money.
Use it.
Yes, sir.
All right.
I don't want this to conflict with what we approved last time. So just clarify.
It doesn't conflict. When we brought this forward at the commission meeting, when I brought it up.
At the end of the meeting.
The end of the meeting. And I can pull that one up if you would like, but it was the 1.5 that we talked about here from the reserves, the other 1.5 that's sitting in the debt service fund. Those collectively with the trade-in value. The trade-in value is a little bit different here. The amount that they had gotten before was about 600,000. That number hadn't been updated. They did a desk audit or a new evaluation based on some time and hours that have gone on. The new estimated trade-in value is the 435, not 600,000. However, there are some things that we're still looking at that could increase that cost. Instead of doing a trade-in, we're currently evaluating whether or not we were to scrap it and sell it for parts. You might end up making more money than the 435. So we're weighing our options, but the numbers haven't changed. If you'd like, I can find the previous amount if you give me a second, if you have questions.
Andy,
For
what
my
was your concern?
Peace of mind, please.
What are you worried about? I missed the,
Well, we had a motion that I don't have in front of me from the last meeting. So I don't have that to read. I don't want to make an error in the motion and then have to do this again.
regarding that 1.5 million, the reserve money, helicopter reserve money? Because that's pretty clear, that's the reserve for the helicopter.
Well, as long as I understand what we approved last time, because it's failing my memory right now.
I mean, as far as the total cost of the helicopter? Is that your concern? Because it's different. This is different.
So the original one that we had, and I don't know that I can share my screen, but the original one that we had, the aircraft with the options, the amount that we were looking to finance, so now it says the 1.9. The previous amount was 1,825,291. That's the original amount that we thought we would be able to finance it for. Now, we had to go back, and like I mentioned earlier, we had to add about $700,000 worth of equipment to this to be able to have that. It's not a FLIR system, but it's like a FLIR. FLIR's a brand name, so I don't remember the name of this, but it's the infrared with the downlink required for law enforcement capabilities. It was like 690,000. The downlink was another, I think, 60 or 90,000. We were able to negotiate those prices down with having Todd Whalen do the project management on it. The only other difference is that trade-in value. Originally, we thought we were going to get 600,000. It's really 435 right now, unless we can part it out and make more money that way. So the new amount, not to exceed finance, was that 1,927,072. Before I had reported it would be 1,825,291.
So do you just need a motion to approve the new finance amount?
The amount that's on the screen, this new amount here.
Is that what you were trying to say? Do we need to clarify where the money's coming from?
Right now, I think it's just a transfer of the 1.5 million out of helicopter reserves is all we're looking for right now.
That was all, that's the only motion he made, was
Right,
just to
but the
take that
finance amount has
1.5 out.
changed as well.
This is one portion of the funding for the helicopter. So $1.5 million that we've saved over the last 4 or 5 years for this purpose. And we just got to take it out of reserves because we can't expend money out of a reserve line. So we're taking it out of there, putting it into a expenditure line that we could use that money with.
Okay, so we're just transferring the money out. Do we need to acknowledge the difference in the amount we're financing?
I would say no, not at this point, because this is just one portion of the total. You see there's several moving parts on this one.
Okay, okay. We don't need like a not to exceed.
No, sir.
No, the only reason why I was bringing it forward is because the amount changed. I don't want to come back to you and say a month or whenever we go to secure a loan for the finance, and now all of a sudden it's a different amount. So as these things start changing, I just want you all to know, so I'm not then now coming forward, weeks later or a month later, and now you've got this new.
You'll come back with the
If
actual
it changes,
finance
we're going to,
amount
yeah,
when
we
to
will.
approve.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I need a motion to take the $1.5 million out of reserve for helicopter and move it into the account for expenditures.
Yes, sir. In the flight ops division.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to move the $1.5 million into an account where we can expend it. I'll open it up for public comment. Any of the public wish to comment on that money exchange? Seeing no one come forward, I bring it back to the commission. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I got for today.
Good. Motion to adjourn, anybody?
Question. Second.
We're moved. We're adjourned.
Also moved.